welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about the fact that our worship captures and reflects our intimacy with God. Let's study. Hey everybody, it's that Sunday School Girl of thatsundayschoolgirl.com. Welcome to the lesson for Sunday, April 29th. I pray that you had a wonderful class this week, that you were enriched by the lessons, but we're getting to the middle of the quarter, so it is my prayer that you are being motivated and encouraged to acknowledge God in all that you do and really thinking about the details of what that means and finding ways to activate these lessons in our everyday lives. That's what this is all about. If you're new around here, welcome. You have just joined the largest cyber community of Sunday school students on the World Wide Web. I am amazingly excited that you are here. Everyone, listen to me. You want to do this. Please make sure that you have subscribed to this channel. Click here, wherever that subscribe button is, and also hit the notifications bell because there are going to be things happening over the next few weeks. It is an exciting time for me personally, but I am also on the verge of our 3-year anniversary with that Sunday School Girl, so you don't want to miss any of the information, any of the uploads, any of the opportunities that will be a part of that celebration. To that end, I think a lot of you did see, if not in last week's video, many of you have commented on my social media pages because I posted my graduation date is May the 12th, so I am looking forward to that. I've got a lot kind of going on. As a matter of fact, I kind of feel like today because my first final is tomorrow. So I ask that you pray for me as I walk out the next couple of days. I've got 2 finals and I am believing God for a strong finish. And it is my prayer that God gives you an amazing week, and whatever you have before him and whatever prayers you have before him, I ask him, I join you in prayer and I ask him to meet every need in your life. Again, we are studying an awesome series in the book of Revelation. We're going to get into the lesson, but I just mentioned to you that we're coming up on the anniversary month of TSSG, which is the month of May. Again, there's going to be a lot that you don't want to miss, but I want to go back to January for a second because it's easy to get into the new year and things are going well and to forget that we set goals, and I want to be accountable to the goals that I have set and the prayers that I have before God, and he is doing so much of what I ask him to do. I'm humbled and I'm honored that each week, this video is now being viewed by more than 10,000 Sunday schoolers across the world, around the world. You can see that even in last week's comments. There were comments from other countries. And so I appreciate God for what he's doing and the reach that he's allowing us to have. But I tell you what, we are hovering around the 9,400 mark of subscribers for that Sunday School Girl. So I am asking you to help us push to 10K. We're back into another 10K race, and that's getting our subscriber class up to 10,000. And I believe that God can do it. And if I can ask your help in just sharing this video, sharing the channel on your social pages, please share it in your Sunday school classes, in your Sunday school trainings, and I will continue to endeavor to do what God has assigned to our hands in changing the way that we see Sunday school. Listen, I've got to get into the lesson for this week, so let's go. Our lesson title is All Creatures Worship God. The Bible basis is Revelation chapter 5, verses 6 through 14. The Bible truth. Revelation speaks of joyful praise and the eternal worship of God. Our memory verse is verse 12, and the lesson aim is that we will analyze the symbols of the heavenly worship of the Lamb, reflect on the significance of the whole world worshiping the Lamb who was slain, and celebrate with joy the faithfulness of God, who promises that the whole world will unite in worship of Christ. Have you ever thought about how difficult it is to align a group of people to one activity? I mean, think about it. Just asking your family, what do you want for dinner, could return you as many ideas and choices and preferences as you have people in your household, because it is challenging sometimes to get us all on the same page. But in this week's lesson, we are continuing in Revelation. And what we're going to see is that this is an environment where there is no differing of opinion or desire or expectation, because everyone, every creature is doing the exact same thing, and that is worshiping the Creator. Again, we are in chapter 5, and we're going through this experience with John. It sort of answers the question that people have: what is heaven really like? And again, we're seeing it through the eyes, or the pen at this point, of John, who is the writer, and he's working really hard in his limited human vocabulary and experience to share all that he sees and he's taken in. Now, remember in chapter 1, verse 19, that John has been instructed to write about the things that he's seen, the things which are, and the things which are hereafter. And we learned last week in chapter 4 that we are now looking at what happens in the hereafter. And chapter 5 really does go very naturally with chapter 4. In fact, you generally would study them together, which is what we've done. Because it continues this vision that John has seen inside of the throne room. Remember in last week's lesson, when John was immediately taken up into the Spirit, he was invited up, and he's in the middle of one of the most beautiful and awesome worship experiences he's ever seen, because it is in the presence of God. He is literally in the throne room of God, and he described the sights that he saw being a very brilliant look around the throne. Talked about jasper, and he talked about a red colored stone, and he talked about a rainbow being around the throne that looked like an emerald. So a lot of color, a lot of activity going on. There are these 4 beasts that are described in chapter 4. There are also the 24 elders who are enthroned around God's throne, and they are dressed in white. And so he sees all of this going on, giving worship to God. And now in chapter 5, whereas his focus has really been on the throne of God at this point, this is sort of a shift, because his attention is shifted to something else. It's a new focal point. We talked about that last week, what your eye is drawn to. And this week, although the printed text for the lesson proper does not go back to verse 1, you'll pick it up in your study this week. Because John now sees something in the right hand of the one who sits on the throne. And we learned last week that that is God sitting on the throne. And this week we'll actually be able to see why we know that it's not Jesus. So God is on the throne, and in his right hand is a scroll. It's a sealed manuscript. And this manuscript is sealed, first of all, with 7 seals. It was very common for a scroll to be written on, and you would roll it from the both ends to the center and seal it with a wax seal, with a piece of string and a wax seal. But this scroll was unique because it had 7 seals and not just one. It also was written on both sides. And this seal, the 7 seals, each of them, any seal on a scroll at all, would have to be broken for the contents to be read. And in this case, all 7 seals would have to be broken for the contents of this scroll to be read. And this scroll basically contains God's master plan. This is what God has already written. This is about what will happen. It's in time. It's comprehensively God's plan for the future. And again, it's unusual because there's writing on both sides. I was also doing some reading, and it was fairly customary that scrolls would have been rolled for horizontal reading. So typically it would be held in the left hand and you would pull with your right hand. But this one was interesting because it was held in God's right hand, not his left, meaning his hand of power, his hand of authority. And again, these 7 seals represent events or judgment or phases that the world would experience in times to come. The number 7 represents completeness or perfection in biblical numerology. So in other words, this scroll is sealed with God's complete plan. It's a complete plan that has been captured, and it's a planned future. God already knows what is going to unfold. And then there's a strong voice of an angel. It says that the voice of a strong angel. And the angel asked the question, who is worthy to open the scroll, to open the seal of the scroll? Who is worthy to take this future and tell us what's going to happen? Who has the authority? Who has the worth to do that? It would take someone who was really special to have the authority and to have the worthiness, and then even to have the ability to carry out what would be written in the scroll. And there was no one. There was no man, no creature, no spirit, past or present, that reached the level of authority of being worthy. And John begins to cry. Again, this is before our printed text. He begins to cry. This is really something to cry about. Think about it. John has gotten this invitation to come up and to see what the future is. And now he's reached this point, and no one and nothing can show him what this future is. And so it was a moment of despair and a moment of grief because there was no one who could open it. So he was likely thinking, so does this mean that sin wins? Does evil win? And an elder speaks to him and says, he brings him comfort. He says to him to weep no more. And then he says, behold. And when we see behold in scripture, it's kind of like, whoa, take a look at this. He says, behold the Lion of Judah. He is the one and the only one who can open the seal. The Lion of the tribe of Judah is actually an Old Testament reference. Now remember, in the Old Testament, the Messiah was anticipated to come as a strong warrior, maybe even a ruler of some type, but instead he came as a humble lamb. And in the second coming, he is anticipated as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Isaiah 11 calls him the root of David. But he is the one, the only one who is authorized, duly authorized to open, read, and execute the contents of this scroll. So again, in verse 5, you have this elder who says, whoa, there he is, look. And so it is reasonable, as we pick up in our printed text in verse 6, that because the elder has said, stop and check this out, that John had a reasonable expectation that he was going to turn around and see a strong and powerful, ferocious, aggressive, courageous lion. But instead, he sees a lamb. A baby sheep, a young sheep, is standing there, meek and humble. And this is where we note from last week, we talked about the fact that it is not Jesus that's on the throne, because God is sitting on the throne, and now here is this lamb. The sovereign lion that was expected is actually a sacrificial lamb. And there are three things about this lamb that are distinct. First of all, the lamb appears as though it has been slain. It appears as if it's been violently killed, if it's been cut up or mutilated in some way for animal sacrifice. It has clearly been handled violently in its past. And again, remember that John is using language that people would have understood, and they were able to make references about what it meant to make sacrifice from festivals, feasts, the Passover, even remembering the sacrifices from the temple. And those sacrifices were always to point people towards the sacrifice of Christ. It was always kind of foreshadowing that sacrifice that would take place. But this lamb appears as if it has been handled violently by some type of sacrifice. And again, this even points to the fact that this is Jesus. This is how he appears after the crucifixion. He, even in heaven, still bears the marks of his crucifixion. The second thing is that the lamb is standing. Even though it appears that the lamb has been killed, this lamb is alive. And we know that it's alive because it's standing, and it also moves and takes the scroll out of the hand of God on the throne. So the lamb was killed but is alive again. And the third thing is that it just looks grotesque. And this is kind of some of that scary imagery that people think about with Revelation. But this lamb doesn't look like we would think about a traditional lamb. It's got 7 horns and 7 eyes and 7 spirits. 7 again being the number of perfection or completion. So it speaks about his perfection. The lamb is perfect. And the horns represent power. Horns on an animal are what they use to gain authority or dominance over another animal. So it shows us that he has perfect strength or perfect power. He also has 7 eyes, which gives him the ability to see, the ability to know, to have insight, to discern. So in other words, he sees all. He's all seeing and all knowing because of what he sees. And then lastly, the Spirit of God, the 7 spirits of God referenced in Isaiah chapter 11, verses 2 through 4. And that's the communication with God. So again, this lamb is perfect. This is a fairly dramatic and an active scene as all eyes are on the one, the only one who is able to open the seal. Now, verse 7 tells us that the lamb moves and approaches the throne and takes the scroll from the right hand of God. Now, look at how that verse is written. He came, he got close enough to actually take the scroll out of the hand of God. And remember, nothing and no one else has gotten that close to God. Remember, even in last week's lesson, the 24 elders surrounding the throne have some distance placed by this floor that looks like a crystal sea of glass. But here the lamb goes all the way to the throne and doesn't just attempt to take the scroll, but actually took, meaning completed the action of taking the scroll from the right hand of God, which means that the Lamb now possesses the future. He has sovereign control over the future, and the fact that he was even allowed to take the scroll shows the transfer of authority, which affirms his ability to open, to read, and to execute the contents of the scroll. Now, verse 8 tells us that there was a worthy response to the only one who was worthy to open the seals. In other words, a praise break like we've never seen breaks out in heaven. All heaven breaks loose when the act of transferring the scroll is complete. Christ is now authorized to judge the world, and the response of heaven is worship. Not the kind where there are 5 people in front of us with a microphone leading us, but where they respond instantly to the worthiness of the one who will open the seals. And the 4 beasts and the 24 elders fall before the Lamb. Remember from chapter 4 that the elders are men who have been redeemed, and they're holding harps, which are stringed instruments that represent gladness and joy. So there's worship in music. And they're also holding golden bowls, which are the prayers of the saints. And the prayers themselves, were like a fragrant incense. And then a major song service breaks out. Verses 9 and 10, we see the first song that's sung by the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders, singing of the worthiness of the Lamb to do 2 things: to take the book and to open the seals. Why is he worthy? He's worthy for 3 reasons. Number 1, because he was slain. Number 2, because he's redeemed us. And number 3, he has made unto our God kings and priests. He was slain. In other words, he paid the price. But then he redeemed us, and let's talk about redemption. Redemption, by definition, is to purchase or to recover something by making payment to satisfy, to bring it back. Think about the Old Testament with Ruth and her need for a kinsman redeemer. And to redeem required 3 things: that they be related, willing, and able to redeem that thing. And Jesus was all of that. Again, he was slain, paying the price. He redeemed us to God. That was the destination. And by his blood, that was his form of payment. Not cash, check, cards, cash app, none of that. He redeemed us by paying with his blood. And who did he redeem? It involved everyone, every kindred, tribe, tongue, people, and nation. And then the third reason was that he's made unto our God kings and priests. In other words, he's allowed us to share in his kingdom as royalty and without the need for a mediator. And as a result, that gave the power for them to reign on earth. The second song is in verses 11 and 12, and that is sung by the 4 creatures and 24 elders, who are joined by this incredible chorus of angels, thousands upon thousands of angels, and they are singing nothing but the truth. They are rehearsing only truth. They're not creating anything new, but they rehearse this truth through 7 expressions. There's that number 7 again, the number of perfection. So here we see perfect worship. And the word "and" is between each one of the elements, showing us the importance of each one individually. He already possesses all, and he's worthy of power, riches, wisdom, strength, honor, glory, and blessings. And I encourage you to take a look at each one of those. And then in verses 13 and 14, we see the final song. Who is singing in this final song? Every created being is singing in this song, and they are singing that blessing and honor, glory, and power belong to him who sits on the throne, meaning to God, and unto the Lamb, meaning to Jesus. So they are giving worship to he on the throne and the Lamb, because they are both to be worshiped. All attention is only on these 2 elements in heaven, these 2 persons who are deserving of our focus, of our worship. And how long is this? Forever and ever, verse 13 tells us. And the 4 beasts in verse 14 respond with amen. It is so, settling that which has been said. And the elders fall prostrate and worship. Again, how long? Forever and ever. In other words, these singers, the beasts, the created beings of every kind, sit now in a place of permanent worship. That's the end of our printed text. Here are my key learnings for this week. Jesus is the only one who has the authority to open, to know, and to carry out God's purpose in our lives. And that for me is a major connection as we look at acknowledging God, knowing that He is sovereign over everything that concerns our future. And He is the one who has all power and all authority. And so it reinforces that importance for us to acknowledge Him, because He already knows what's going to happen. And we need to acknowledge Him so that we have the guidance that we need as we walk this walk. Secondly, the center of our worship is God. And we must constantly focus our energy, our efforts, our attention on God's majesty and His sovereignty. Again, our worship captures the intimacy of our relationship with God. So part of acknowledging God is the time that we spend creating relationship with Him, just like we do in the natural. When you want to get to know someone, you talk with them, you spend time with them, you begin to share with them, and the relationship opens up. It's the same way with God. As we spend time with Him, as we spend time in His Word, as we spend time in prayer, it enhances our relationship and it begins to open up. And God will speak to us and lead us in ways that we never knew were possible, because we've opened ourselves to acknowledging Him in all that we do. Lastly, the importance of our prayers, and they're being held in a special place. We should know that our prayers don't hit the roof and come back down, but they are making it to heaven, and they're in the throne room of God. And knowing that God hears us when we pray means so much, but He holds our prayers in a special place. That is the lesson for this week. I know that you will dig and get so much more. And yes, after I take my final, I'm going to be watching the comments and studying a little bit more and gaining some insight myself. So I'm so open to things that you pick up in the lesson and things that you will teach teachers, questions that you will draw out. I'd love to see it. So leave comments below. Also, as a reminder, if you want the accompanying study notes for this video, the link for them is down below, and you can download those and have them for your study this week or for your binders. That's it. Everyone, have a super fantastic week, and I will see you in Sunday school. Bye, everybody.